Hello and welcome to Whisky.com, where fine spirits meet. And today we have another 360 video. You can look around and actually one thing at the start, go down to the options and set the quality to on manual at the highest level, so you can actually enjoy this at the highest quality, because it's actually 360 degrees is still not bit with the highest quality. So you can look around, everything is really authentic here. And Benromach is a distillery that was fairly old. It was founded in 1898, and Benromach is one of these distilleries that has been sold very often and has been discontinued the production and taken up the production again. Last time it was sold in 1993 to the independent bottler Gordon MacPhail, and the production was taken up in 1998, and that is actually 20 years ago now. And the first cask was actually signed by Prince Charles, and just a few months ago this cask was bottled at their 20th jubilee. And then the bottles were sold and auctioned off, and it was all given to a beneficial cause. So it was a really nice thing from Benromach. Benromach is also really traditional, and today we're gonna find out what this, how this influences the production and why it is so traditional. So I've told you that the distillery is a very traditional distillery, and here is one of these traditional tools. This is actually a box with a grit inside. So you take your grist after the milling into this box, you close the box, you shake the box, and then the grist separates and you can find out what the malt is made of. And you weigh it afterwards, and you should always have the right ratio, and that's how you define a good malt. The other traditional tool you can see here is this old bobby mill. It's a very old mill, at least 100 years old, and it mills down the malt. The malt is very important for the production, and the distillery gets it from local maltings, and they get their barley from different farmers from Scotland. So the distillery actually looks out for stuff that is actually made from Scotland. Important is also that the malt has a certain level of peat smoke in it. First of all, we have the organic, which is an unpeated whiskey. So the distillery has to shut down production, clean everything, get all the peat smoke out from the last production, and then they can produce the spirit for the Benromach organic. Then we have the normal expressions, the 10-year-old, 15-year-old, and the others. They are at around 10 to 12 ppm. And in the end, we have the Benromach heavily peated, which has about 45, 50 ppm. This varies a bit. So if you have these manual tools, then you have a bit of variation in the process, but that's what people like about the Benromach whiskey. So behind me is the beautiful copper mash tun. It has a capacity of 7,500 liters, and it takes about 1.5 tons of grist to fill it up. The Benromach distillery has 3 washings. The first one at 64 degrees Celsius, the other one at 75, and the last one at 90. The first 2 washings actually go to the fermentation, and the last washing has so little sugar and starch that it's not really usable for fermentation. So they store it in a separate tank and use that little bit of sugary water to have it in the first washing again, so they can actually really extract the maximum of sugar and starch out from the grist they are producing. This is the next traditional thing here at the distillery, and that is the old wooden washbacks. They have a capacity of 7,500 liters, and the distillery has 13 of them. What they also do is they don't only use distiller's yeast, but they also use brewer's yeast. And what that gives you is a bit more flavorful character. You have a bit more fruity character, a bit nuttier, just a bit richer. Also, the brewer's yeast is a bit slower. what then the distillery then has to do is they have to have actually a long fermentation time of, on average, 90 hours. That is really long, but lets the fermentation take a bit slower and just a bit fruitier in the end. In the end, you do have 8% ABV, and that goes to the distillation. And what you might also notice is that you don't have the switcher blades that is actually breaking down the foam. And that's because the distillery has what they call a cloudy mash, and that doesn't bubble as much, and therefore you don't foam over and you don't need the switch blades. So now we come to the hard piece of the distillery, the stills. To my right here is the wash still. The wash still is, you can always find the wash still by looking at the watch glasses. The watch glasses are there because they can bubble over, so you see how high it is bubbling, and you never want to have the wash still bubble over because it could clog up your condenser and then build up pressure, and that will be really dangerous. Yeah, you start with a wash of about 8%, and they still it up to about 22% of alcohol, and this comes then to the spirit still. The spirit still is very, very important for the taste. So the shape of the spirit still is pretty pear shape. It has a bit of a tall neck, but it's still pretty straightforward. So there you can have a really spicy character. This is also supported by the speed of distillation, and you have a hard piece of about 1 hour, 20 minutes. That is pretty fast, so the alcohol doesn't separate so much, and that means you do have a more spicy character, you do have a rough character, and it's just a full Highland whiskey. Yeah, the line arm is a bit falling at the very top. You can see that everything that is condensing at the very top is flowing towards the condenser. And the condenser is a normal shell and tube condenser that is located outside the building. And the final product is between 63 and 72% ABV, and that is then a final product that ends up in the cask. So I told you about the traditions, and the tradition doesn't end here. It actually really just starts. Usually all the new distilleries, they use barcodes and computer systems to remember where all their casks are. And Benromach does not do that. Benromach has the old traditional way of locating their casks. They have a stencil and they roll on the name of the distillery, the year, and then you have to have a cask number, and you can do that with this stencil here. So you just go 1989, and in the end you do have nice black letters, Benromach 2018 number 1989. So this is how many casks they produce about a year, because this is now November and pretty much 1 month till the end of the season. Yeah. Next step here is you remove the old bung, you screw that in and you pull it out, and then the cask is open. Well, let's talk a bit more about the quality of the casks, because Benromach only uses really, really good wood. They only use wood that has been in first fill casks. That means you have first fill bourbon or first fill sherry. That means bourbon has been matured once in this cask, or sherry has been matured once in this cask. This here is one of the first fill bourbon casks. There's one whiskey at the Benromach distillery which is actually an exception, and that is the organic. The organic uses virgin oak casks, means that are fresh American oak casks that had nothing in before, just dry oak casks. They're being shipped from America to here to Scotland and then being filled with the organic. After you have filled up the cask, you have to hammer in a new bung. Then you just find the right size of bung, and you have that big mallet here, and you hammer it in. Oh, and actually I took a bit too big bung. This looks like maybe 2¼ inch. I'm not quite sure because I use a metric system, and this might be a 2-inch bung or something like that. Yeah, after it has been sealed off, it's airtight, then you have to roll it to the next stage. And the next stage is exactly for the taxman, because you have to exactly document how much whiskey you have filled into the casks. This here is a traditionally old mechanic scale, and you can find out if you weigh the cask beforehand, and afterwards you can find out how much you filled into the cask. There's a bit book, you write it into the book, you write what you filled into that cask, what cask number it has, and actually which warehouse and position you're rolling it onto, so the people at the distillery have a good overview of what they have and where everything lies. The tradition continues in the warehouse. And the most traditional warehouse in Scotland is the dunnage warehouse. Yeah, I'm standing in one of the 5 dunnage warehouses that Benromach uses for maturing their whiskey. Let's talk about how a warehouse is filled and emptied in the very traditional style. You do have 3 layers of casks, and what you need with the layers of casks is you always have to have the bung up. You can see all around all the signatures of Benromach are upside, so they did a good job, and all the bungs are up. And what you need for that is timing. The guys roll in the barrels, and then you have a little forklift that you can put the barrel on, lift it up, and then you have to do the timing. Timing has nothing to do with actual time, but the actual clock. I think the Americans call it clocking. And you imagine there's a clock on the cask, and the bung is at 12 o'clock. And you want to have the bung at the very bottom at 12 o'clock. So you have to calculate, and the guys actually do that in their heads. And you say, that's about, okay, 6 barrel or 6 cask, we have to have it at 9 o'clock. Then you roll it in, and then at the very end, it stops at 12 o'clock, and the bung is up, and there is no leakage. Yeah, this is done here with these bourbon barrels, and also the distillery has some sherry casks. Yeah, the distillery is really known for their sherry casks, and they actually do store the sherry casks 3 high. Not many people do that. Usually they only do them 2 high. But the distillery of Benromach, they have a lot of these sherry casks. They have 65% sherry casks. And that's what's so great about the Benromach whiskey. They have a really strong sherry influence. And if you look at that, there was an apprentice at work, because this bung is definitely not at 12 o'clock. And yeah, the signature is upside down. So yeah, that's about it with the Benromach distillery. It is a very old, traditional Scotch that is really, really, really cool. So look around, the Benromach whiskey is pretty much international available. And yeah, I highly advise you to get one of these bottles. And thank you very much for watching. And if you found this video interesting, then please give it a thumbs up and tell me something about how you think was the 360 video worth it? Did you like it? Could there anything be improved? Thank you very much for watching, and